And we're live. This is the Right Geek. I am here with Saber Matt tonight, and we are going to discuss one of our favorite science fiction shows of the 1990s, and that is Star Trek DS9. As I said in the title of this hangout, DS9 is best Trek.
It's really close.
Yeah.
Right.
So we have Matt here tonight. Matt happens to be my brother. He also happens to be a published author. Matt, talk about some of the things that you have had published.
So I was for a time a member of the Conservative Libertarian Fiction Alliance, and they put together a short story anthology that received some pretty decent reviews. I submitted one of my better short stories to that called Martian Sunrise, kind of a emotional retrospective for a scientist on Mars going through family loss. And I have a couple of other short stories with a sort of circumspect political commentary involved up at Liberty Island that were contest winners / honorable mentions. Funny, the contest winner I had, Break the Sky, got me an invitation to an invitational writers conference. So now I'm in a nice peer review group thanks to that. So thanks, Liberty Island. I appreciate it.
Yes, so actually, technically, we can say that you're an award-winning short story author.
Award-winning, yes.
In a manner of speaking, yes.
I'm stumbling along, trying to start out. It's beginning for me, but
Right. And are you currently working on anything?
I am. I've got a work in progress that's gone through many rounds of revisions, thanks to fantastic advice I've gotten from a couple of different critique groups, but is now starting to round into much better form in terms of the timeline and structure and character development and whatnot. It's a learning process for me. My first attempt at a full novel, and it's going to be the first in a long series documenting the need for us to listen to each other, essentially, is the theme. We do a poor job of respecting that other people who don't think like us are also actually people. So, so the whole idea is to get us to focus on the idea that we're all human and that we're not some evil demon race that is set upon our rivals to torture them.
Yes, I think that's a needed message, which became all the more apparent this week. Not that we're going to get off track, but very much so. Okay, so now on to the actual topic of this live stream, Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Otherwise known as the only Trek that draws my attention over and over.
Exactly. One of the things I've noticed about DS9 is that on rewatch, I find more and more things that I did first time I watch it, but now I appreciate, probably because I am older, maybe a little more enlightened. So I notice things that I didn't notice when I was 12 years old.
Our political climate has changed. So when you watch it now, it seems more prescient sometimes.
Ah, that's true. In what way do you mean?
So there's a lot of commentary about how Federation ideals are challenged by situations where people don't respect them. Mm-hmm. The situation with the Maquis, for example, early on in the show's history, I love Kira's speech Cisco's speech about how, you know what our problem is? Earth. You know, they live in paradise. We don't live in paradise out here. And yeah, it's your ideals don't work when you don't have resources.
Yeah, if you don't have a post-scarcity society, which exists in the Federation, in the Star Trek universe, suddenly the calculus becomes different. Yeah, and that speech in the Maquis is interesting, even in today's society right now, where what we have going on in the U.S. right now is this divide. It's a geological and cultural divide between basically two general groups of Americans, and the divide has gotten wide enough, I think, that at times we're unable to talk to each other because we just haven't shared the same experiences.
I don't think it's even at times. I think that generally, unless we're talking about subjects that apply to everyone as much as possible, generally people have a real hard time understanding the expectations and limitations of the ways of life from urban to rural if you don't live in one or the other. So East Coast folks who live in the cities don't understand why people would find it frustrating that everything is hyper-regulated, because in the city, if you don't hyper-regulate, sometimes things get really hard to live in. But if you're out in the boondocks, and hyper-regulation prevents you from actually getting anything done. So, and you have people dictating to you what needs to happen, and you're like, you don't even understand how we live. How can you help us?
Quite true. Yeah. The other thing that that DS9 shows us that I think is an issue very much today is the concept of the clashes of faith or lack thereof, and how we navigate when people have different fundamental belief systems about how the universe came to be, and how we fit into that universe. We see that most prominently in how the Federation officers, including Cisco, interact with Bajoran society with this very distinctly religious aspect, which comes into conflict many times with the sort of Federation practical atheist way of seeing things.
Yeah, it's not even just the Bajorans. I like to go back to Treachery, Faith, in the Great River. You know, it's kind of a foreign concept for even Odo, who isn't, not Federation, but he doesn't have the experience of living as a founder. Or living within the Dominion. It's a foreign experience for him to think it's acceptable for someone to see him as a god.
Right.
But he has to figure out how to navigate that in a moral way as he sees it. When somebody's worshiping him as a god and asking him for forgiveness that he doesn't feel he has the right to offer. You know, so that's a fascinating little exchange. And I also appreciate that the Federation has to deal with the Ferengi, with their sort of uniquely materialist religion.
Right, yeah. And, I don't think that DS9 always handled the Ferengi in a respectful manner, and I think you agree with this.
Of course not, yeah.
But there were times, very surprising times, when the Ferengi were allowed to be quintessentially Ferengi, and yet that turned out to work in the situation's favor. Like, when Nog manages to get something that we need by using his capitalist instincts.
Yeah, in that very
of course, when we talk,
to say the Magnificent Ferengi has some of that in 6th season. It's a great one.
Yes, to some extent, yeah. Of course, when we're talking about the clash of belief systems, we can't ignore the fact that Cisco's journey as a character is all about a clash in belief systems.
And his evolution leads him toward a growing, increasing respect for the system that he's not used to over time. Right.
So you have at the beginning of the series, you have him basically being very uncomfortable with this concept that he is a religious figure in this society that he's trying to bring into the Federation. And then over time, as you said, he gains more respect for that society and actually chooses to live within that society by the end. That was ultimately his plan. He was going to move down to Bajor with his family and live with the Bajorans, right?
Yep.
And that's quite a fascinating journey that he goes on.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting about the way they chose to do that, they shortchanged it a little bit because they ran out of time and they had too much story they had to finish.
Right.
What was interesting about that isn't even just that he chose to live as a Bajoran, but he started to really enjoy expressing the religious part of his Bajoran life. There were times he really got into, giving people blessings for their wedding and taking part in Bajoran ceremonies as the religious icon. And he considered it his responsibility to defend their faith by the end.
Mhm.
So it's just, I just found it very interesting.
Yeah, and not only that, he was starting to fall in love with Bajoran culture outside of the religion. You
Yep.
have an episode like Explorers, where the entire episode is just him obsessively pursuing this idea that the Bajorans made it to Cardassia in sail ships, right?
Yeah.
And that didn't have anything to do with the religion at all. That was just him being interested in the other cultural aspects of Bajor too. So it goes even deeper than just his recognizing that the religion is something to respect. He kind of falls in love with the people as a whole.
That's right. And I think that all begins, falling in love with the people, I think that starts with In the Hands of the Prophets.
Yes, very much a pivotal episode.
I think that he comes into contact with it in a negative way, and then he realizes that the people around him are reacting in this very canned, short-sighted way in terms of the Federation side. Like his son saying, it's all stupid. This is all stupid.
Yeah.
And I think it makes him take a step back and go, whoa. You know, first of all, Kira said, she supported Win, which is like,
yeah. Whoa, yeah.
I'm going to go, whoa, really?
Yeah.
And then Jake says the opposite, basically, and he's like, whoa, don't like that either. Okay. I need to find a way to forge a real relationship with these people and actually reach out to them on their level. And I think from that moment on, he does that.
Right.
That's his guiding philosophy.
Yeah. And, the other story in that episode, of course, is Kira coming at the same conclusion from a different side.
Yep.
How she starts off the series being essentially hostile to the Federation presence in her solar system. But now she had, but by the end of this episode, she has come to respect the Federation and their way of seeing things, just as Cisco at the same time is coming to respect how Bajorans see things.
Right. I think that one of the key things there with Kira's switch in that episode is that Cisco is willing to actually reach out and say, all right, I understand now, like to make a real effort to like speak to the Bajoran religious caste directly and actually address their concerns on a spiritual level instead of just hanging at them from a Federation dogmatic way, like Picard might have.
Right. And of course, when we're talking about In the Hands of the Prophets, we can't skip over that. You kind of alluded to it before, that great scene in Cisco's office with Keiko and Kira at odds with each other about how things are going to be handled at the school.
Yeah.
And Kira has this line that I think is that was amazing to me when I heard it in a Star Trek, when she said, some might say that teaching science without a religious background is a philosophy, Mrs. O'Brien. And I was like, yes, finally, someone has acknowledged this. And you just in so many ways that episode was amazing because it was able to balance these different perspectives and not make one particular perspective seem entirely off base or entirely ridiculous.
Yeah, I love that, some would say that teaching science without any philosophical or religious context is a philosophy. Yeah. That is an important thing that modern Americans needed to hear even then and definitely need to hear now.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Especially since nowadays we have this uptick in science worship. Like, science is the thing that's going to replace all morality. It's good to have a show actually acknowledge that, maybe that is not the way that we should see things, right?
I think it's really dangerous, and I think that DS9's writers may not have even realized that they were taking the correct side. Because if you listen to them talk, they don't strike me as the type of people who would be sort of against the more dogmatic pro-science position.
Right.
So I think they were trying to be clever and balanced in their writing, and I think they didn't realize that some of us folks would take comfort in that. But when you're a guy like me who's got a conservative bent, you you take what you can get,
Yeah. Well, and actually DS9 gave a lot, and I think the reason why is that the writers might have had their particular philosophies and their particular way of doing things, but if you are trying to write a good story with good characters, you are forced to look at things from sides that you've not considered before. And so I think because they may have had, entirely scientific leftist perspectives on things, but they were good writers first and foremost, and that means that they had to make an effort to understand the other side. And because they were good writers, and because they made that effort to understand the other side, that came through in the show, and that's why conservatives like you and I can appreciate it.
Yeah, and they also seem to be, this is the one time where relativism helps you. If you're trying to write a good story, you're trying to hear all perspectives, the relativist writer says, well, we don't want to come down on one side or the other too hard, right?
Yeah.
So you didn't get a nice understanding of multiple perspectives followed by a conclusion at the end that this perspective that we don't like is wrong. You got, okay, well, we come down on one side in terms of the solution for the story, but we don't necessarily come away saying, well, this, other side that disagreed was clearly wrong, except in the case of, inhumane acts and evil people.
Right. Right. And I think that desire to tell a good story and that desire to present all sides of the matter reverberated throughout the show, so that you have episodes like Destiny, where a Bajoran prophecy comes true, but not necessarily in the way that the Bajoran cleric thought it was going to, and yet it did still come true, right? So they had this sort of synthesis going on where, okay, the Bajoran cleric was wrong. He wasn't interpreting it correctly, but that doesn't mean that prophecy is not real, Yeah,
what their essential conclusion was, the problem with prophecy, the problem with being dogmatic about prophecy is that it's all interpretive.
Right.
So you can get anything out of prophecy if you want to, but they don't invalidate the possibility that someone who can see the length of time, the prophet, right, God, or whoever you want to put into position of being outside of linear time, could give us information from a different perspective. Right. I appreciated Kira bringing that point up, and I appreciated at the end Cisco sort of giving respect to it.
Right. So, right. Yeah, we don't. Scripture of any kind is interpretive, so we don't always know exactly what was intended by the deity when we read scripture. It does need to be interpreted in some way, and maybe one person's particular interpretation is not right, and what was really intended was this.
Right.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we wanted to talk about when we were doing the pre-show chat was the idea of building a great ensemble, which we both agreed that DS9 is an epitome of how you do that. One of the best examples of how you build a great ensemble. So how, in your opinion, how exactly did DS9 accomplish that?
So if you're a writer, you have to love your characters. I mentioned this to you before, and I want to emphasize the key to being a good writer, and I'm learning this now, I'm at the beginning of the journey here, but the key to being a good writer is loving your characters and understanding them. And a lot of times I think that other Star Trek incarnations spent a lot of time generating characters because they served the story interest. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the secondary characters, that did come back once in a while because people thought they were kind of cool in the first thing they did. But mm-hmm. most of those things were meant to be one-offs, and most of them were meant to be it's kind of an interesting thing for this story. We need this type of thing to occur to have our characters play against, because they really only cared about primarily the main characters and what they were doing. But on DS9, I think that the writers spent a lot of time just delving into the world and thinking about, what kind of things can we put on the station? What kind of people we put on the station or near it that we would have to interact with on a regular basis? And what about their lives would influence the way they think about us, so that we could get a more depth, a deeper perspective going back and forth. So you end up seeing that they fully developed characters like Ducat before the pilot. Like, before they even filmed an episode, they had a deeper idea of Ducat than TNG writers would have for 99% of their secondary characters. And, it expands from there. They've developed Garrick's character. They developed Kai Wynn's character. They developed, Shakar's character a little bit, although he was kind of one of the weaker ones. They developed Wei Yun's character deliciously. The female changeling, Nog, Ram, you just go down the list. Even people like Lita, who are not, Lita isn't exactly possessed of enormous depth as a character, but they did give her a lot of attention, a lot of airtime to max out her potential in any way they could be maxed out. So the key then, they did love the characters, and then they gave them a lot of time to breathe. They filled their episodes with opportunities to interact with those people and talk to them. Mm-hmm. And they interviewed them in episode format, essentially.
Right. And, do you have the stream on right now? Because I hear an echo.
It's playing on the screen, yes.
Okay.
Should I be doing something different?
You might want to mute that part so you can, because sometimes the echo comes through into the stream.
How do I mute? My microphone is currently. If I mute my microphone, you can't hear me, so that's not what I want to do.
No, you don't want to mute that.
How do I mute the stream?
Actually, I'm not hearing the echo anymore, so maybe it was just a temporary thing.
Huh. Okay, well, if it comes back, let me know.
All right, yeah. Anyway, sorry, little technical thing. Right, so certainly one of the outstanding features of DS9, and I think part of the reason why DS9 was able to have the kind of cast that it was its setting. When you put yourself in basically a stationary place, you are going to have to interact with several people multiple times over the course of the series.
Right.
You can't just warp off to the next star system when you're on a space station that's at a important galactic transfer point, essentially.
Right.
So you are going to interact with people multiple times. But yes, what you were saying about how it's not just the setting that allowed us to get to know these characters better, but it's also the thought that the writers put into how each of these characters were going to fit into this setting and how they were going to interact with the Federation characters and what kind of different perspectives they were going to offer. And actually, I think some of the greatest episodes of the series essentially centered on, or at least heavily featured, characters that were not credited regulars.
Right.
So, and we're about to get into the eternal debate here. So, the best episode ever in The Pale Moonlight.
Second best.
No, best, totally best.
Even the true best episode heavily focuses on non-regular characters, but
right, yeah. No. The actual true best episode.
Garrick is the central figure in that, so
the actual true best episode. The reason why in The Pale Moonlight worked so well was the use of Garrick and the use of Quark to provide those outside perspectives to what Cisco was doing. And so you have that really delicious scene with Quark, saying to Cisco,
I think we'll call it a bribe.
Yeah.
For restoring my faith in the 118th or whatever it was acquisition.
Every price. Every man has his price. It's so great. And then
Cisco's walking away like, oh.
Yeah. And then, of course, the use of Garrick was also, I think, divinely inspired in a certain respect. And that, hey, you know, Garrick was there. Garrick's scene at the end with Cisco, you know, you chose me to help you because you knew I could do the things that you can't do.
Yep.
You knew that my moral compass is different than yours and that I was willing to go farther than you were willing to go as a Federation officer. And I thought that was amazing too. And that's why I think that is best episode. and why I think you're wrong about what you think the best episode is.
The CJR 558 lacks that sort of dynamic. What the reason it appeals to me is that it forces you to stop glorifying the horrors of war and yet forces you to recognize its necessity. So a lot of science fiction authors, they go the Starship Troopers way, where, you know, war is this like epic masculine thing, or they go to the extreme negative, where war is absolutely evil and every time we do it, it's the worst thing ever. Mm-hmm. What CJR 558 does is require you to realize, no, this is really terrible, and we have to recognize how bad it is when we have to do this. So don't glorify it. When Worf comes in and says, this was a great victory, one worthy of story and song, Cisco's sort of ash-mouthed response is, it cost enough. You know, you're not allowed to sit there and say, woohoo, this is awesome. At the same time, when they're about ready to use the Houdinis to blow the hell out of the Dominion, we have a brief moral reflection moment where Ezri says, you know, just a few hours ago we were thinking of these kinds of things as something only evil people like the Dominion would use, and now we're about to use them.
Yeah.
And Cisco's like, this isn't open for debate. They're going to come through that ravine, and we have to blow up as many of them as we can, all right?
Right.
So,
Which was, that's another unusual thing about DS9 compared to the other treks, is that acknowledgement multiple times during the series that in certain situations you may have to do things that are not exactly ethical or not exactly moral, but they are the right thing to do, because if you don't do those things, then something infinitely worse is going to happen.
Right. And they don't come down the side of saying, yes, that was moral.
Yeah.
They don't say that, because that's wrong. It's wrong to say something that's immoral is moral because it was necessary. That's how you get communism.
Right.
But what they say is, you know, we know it's immoral. We live with that. We live that we had to do something really bad, but we have to. We can't. And that's why you love In the Pale Moonlight, and so do I. But,
yeah.
You know, I have to live with it, and I can, because the result is what had to happen, or else we were all dead.
Right. Right. And I mean, those two episodes display that. Other elements of the Dominion war plot display that, like the discussion of introducing the virus into the founder population is another example where those issues came up and were discussed again in a balanced way that recognize that when you're facing existential threat, maybe we don't have the time to, or we can think about the ethical and moral aspects of the situation, but sometimes we have to do the thing that really sticks in our craw, that really feels horrible, because if we don't, something infinitely worse is going to happen, as I said before. And then you have like how Cisco handles his Maquis problem too.
Yeah.
Which is
that's pretty epic. And
yeah.
I'm going to destroy 2 planets.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll be edible for the other side, but you know, as far as Holocaust that I'm raining down on you, and then you're going to give in because we have to put a stop to this right now.
Yeah. Kind of a tit for tat thing.
Yeah, you blew up their planets, I blew up your planets.
Yeah, yeah.
We're done.
Which, you know, people who have watched the other treks see something like that and go, "Whoa, what the heck is going on?" like that one reviewer, SF Debris. Holy shit, he just blew that shit up. Picard would be like, target their engines, target their weapons. But Cisco says, Cisco says, Mr. Warp, prepare a photon torpedo and write on it, don't fuck with the Cisco.
So true.
Yeah, but I think they announced even in the very first episode, even in the pilot episode, that Cisco was going to be that kind of character. Or that he was not going to be traditional Starfleet. And one of the things I mentioned in the pre-show chat was taking chances with characters. This is something that talking to Jim McCoy kind of illuminated for me. And that was because he was, when he was talking to me about DS9, he was watching it again because he hadn't really watched the whole series. And one of the things he said about Emissary was that a lot of the characters come off as unlikable in that first episode. And
Owen's a horrible autocrat. Kira is obnoxious. Bashir is a twat. Sorry for people who care about language, but Bashir is an utter ugh.
Yeah.
Dax is like too aloof. Cisco hates Picard for no reason.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, wow, you people are not nice.
Yeah. That was and the Picard thing was the thing that Jim McCoy noticed most distinctly was here, you know, here is this legendary captain of Starfleet that you know, most Trek fans have grown to love. Yeah. And we have this new character that this new leading character that we're introducing. And the first thing he does when he interacts with Picard is basically treat him like shit. Whoa, wait a second. What are we trying to do? Well, what are we trying to set up here? Yeah. So, and that was taking a real chance to have your new character who you're trying to introduce to the audience and kind of sell to the audience. Basically claps back at a character that is so beloved, right? But I think the reason why they started at that point with so many of the characters is that allowed the characters to grow in ways that on other series that growth was not as possible. So we had to start Kira at, you know, -10 in terms of her relationship to Cisco and to the Federation in general, because first of all, it made sense given her backstory. And number two, otherwise we would not have been able to see her opinion of the Federation evolve and change over time, which is part of what makes the character interesting. If there is no evolution, there's no interest in the character. And you know, and same with Bashir. Like you said, he was an insufferable twat at the very beginning. Oh my God, I just wanted to slap him silly. But because he started at that place, at that -10 place, that made his evolution throughout the series much more interesting and much more distinctive.
Yeah, his tendency to go right to the Dr. Bashir's House of Horrors medical experimentation stuff never really faded, but everything else about him improved.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, we have some at least when we're talking about Bashir, there are some very good kind of sleeper episodes that are not necessarily recognized as great episodes by most reviewers, but are in fact moments where we saw growth in Bashir as a character. Okay, I'm brain farting. What's the name of that episode with the quickening? It was called The Quickening, right? Yeah. Okay.
Operator, give me 911.
Yeah. So The Quickening being a good example of a sleeper episode that was focused on growing a character, and because of that, it became a very good episode. And there were many such episodes like that weren't. I think that's what makes one of the things that makes DS9 stand out is that it had its blockbuster episodes, of course, because every Star Trek does. But so many of the quote unquote filler episodes that were not, focused on long-term storylines necessarily, managed to accomplish something incredible anyway, because again, the writers focus on character and on growing characters.
Another one that pops into my mind is The Wire, in terms of quiet bottle episodes that had very little in them to advance the long-term plots, and yet were so eminently enjoyable to watch.
Yes.
That's the one Garrick has the brain wire that he's
right. Yeah.
addicted to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
or Children of Time.
Yes, Children of Time, another episode that might creep out some TNG viewers, but say what? One of our heroes deleted an entire civilization?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
yeah. Say what? Yeah. But also
bullshit the tech way to escape that problem?
Yeah. No, no.
The third way does not appear.
Yeah.
You have to make a hard choice.
Yeah. And the third way does not appear, and it doesn't appear even though we spent this entire episode basically growing to love this little settlement here, and the leading characters make this intimate connection with them on so many levels. And nope, we can't find the third way solution that preserves everybody. Somebody has to die.
Yes, it's very depressing for people who really love TNG and especially Voyager.
Yeah.
Because so often the point of those stories is to say these are false dichotomies, and making the hard choice isn't always the right choice. Sometimes you have to try to be more creative, which is also a fair point.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have to come face to face with the reality that sometimes we aren't creative enough.
Right.
Sometimes we can't think of a better way. And no matter how hard we try, a decision has to be made because there's a time limit, because there's a resource limit, because people are about to die, etc. And you just decide.
Right. Which I think that's a good encapsulation of a lot of DS9's theme, where a lot of the situations that they find themselves in are situations where there's a time limit or somebody's going to die. So we don't have enough time to think of the ideal solution that will serve all parties. We have to do with the one that's going to work.
Yep.
You have to go with the one that's going to work.
There's a ton of those.
Yeah.
The internal episodes in DS9, the quiet gems, oftentimes they're great because a character that hasn't had a ton of screen time lately is now in center focus and doing something unexpected of that character in their traditional support role. They're doing something that adds to their depth, and usually it's in the capacity of being forced to make a tough choice they wouldn't normally be forced to make. Especially O'Brien. Poor O'Brien.
Oh yes, let's talk about their the DS9 writers had this thing where they had to torture O'Brien at least once every season. just for the fun of torturing O'Brien, I don't know what that was about.
I think it was just that O'Brien is every man, and torturing every man is great drama, but you know what? He did it so well. Colm Meaney is a great actor in that situation, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, didn't they, it's been a while since I've watched the commentaries, but didn't they just straight up admit, we just wanted to torture O'Brien once a season because he was every man, and it was fun to torture him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Third season egg commentary, if you go find it in your DVD,
in
response to that season's Torture O'Brien episode, which I'm forgetting which it was now.
Third season?
Third season. What was this Torture O'Brien episode in that one? There was one. Was it the one where he was jumping forward in time? Is that what the one?
Yeah, that's what again, my mind is blanking on the title. Usually I'm so good at titles, but...
That's a third season episode where he kind of has to go through a lot of tough situations. But he had 2 in second season. He had Tribunal and he had Armageddon Game. He had 2 in fourth season, including the one where he, kills a fake prisoner in his own mind.
Right. Oh, geez. Yeah.
That was a tough one.
Yeah.
But like a lot of those episodes, but in the third season commentary, they straight up said, torturing O'Brien makes for great drama because the audience, understands O'Brien better than they understand the other characters.
Right. Right.
So we have to torture him pretty regularly. Right.
He's the most ordinary. He's the most ordinary of the characters. He's got a wife and kids. He's not even an officer.
Just a chief petty officer, not a ranking guy.
Yeah.
He's a fix-it man. He's not a genius.
Yeah.
He's a genius at fixing stuff, but he's not a intellectual genius per se.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was always something weird about Trek in general, is that they never showed the enlisted people all that much, aside from O'Brien. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, even Voyager. You would think on Voyager they would spend a lot of time with the enlisted crew that was there, because there's 174 people on the ship when it starts, and somehow magically, like 27, twice that number die, and yet there's still people left when they get to the end. But they're doing the counting math errors of the writers. Eventually, you're going to start having to focus on some of those backup characters because they're stuck in a bottle.
Yeah.
You can't always be the top 7 people.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, that's one of the things that I've always considered. One of the failings that I've always considered Voyager to have is that we had this really great setup with the basically everyone in a bottle situation, and we never really took advantage of that.
Yeah, there's 1 or 2 episodes where they focus on some extras, but generally not. And I don't know why, because it's not like they weren't having gangbuster brilliant ideas for the main characters every single week. It's not like, and they didn't have brand new enemies to chase down for 3 or 4 of the seasons where they were, it's all the Hirogen or the freaking Kazon.
Yeah.
For 5 out of the 7 seasons, those are their enemies. It's like, okay, a little more creativity. I can understand if you had a lot of things to fight, so the main characters have to be in focus. But you're on a bottle ship. It's a generational ship, for all you know.
Right.
So, why don't we figure out how the main characters interact with the lesser characters and see the lesser characters grow on us? You have an opportunity. They're stuck in there.
Right.
And then, if you want to kill some of them, it actually creates drama.
Right.
But they didn't do that, so, we didn't get the opportunity to really get attached to any one of those red shirts that dies.
Right. Which in some ways makes Voyager kind of the antithesis of DS9, because in DS9 you had so many accessory characters that we did get to know and care for.
Yep.
And so when bad things happen to them, it matters. Like with Nog in the Siege of AR-558. I mean, and by the way, when you were talking about the Siege of AR-558, that kind of reminded me of the follow-up episode to that.
Yes, it's only a paper moon.
It's only a paper moon, which one of the pet peeves that I've always had about other Treks is dumbass holodeck characters. Why are we spending so much time on the dumbass holodeck?
And there's some people who watch DS9 that don't like the Jimmy Darren role, Vic Fontaine.
Yeah.
But I think that I will hand wave him the bullshit of the science of that.
Yeah.
Accept it, because when they used him, it was always to benefit the rest of the characters in the story in a way that made you appreciate them more. Yeah. And so the rule of cool applies.
Yeah.
And I tolerate Vic Fontaine, even though he's not really the kind of character I would write.
Yeah.
Because, hey, guess what? He helped Kira and Odo get together, although that episode was a little cheesy.
Yeah.
But then he's, crucial for them later on.
Yeah.
He helps Bashir and O'Brien cope with the stress of the war.
Yeah.
He helps Worf figure out what his problem is, why he's so pissed off when Jadzia dies.
Yeah.
He saves Nog's life. I mean, really.
Really, yeah. And that was kind of the point I was building toward, which is that in the other Treks, the holodeck characters really felt like diversions from
Right.
the intention of the story, whereas in the case of Vic Fontaine, as cheesy as he often was, the writers were able to use him to advance character and to advance plot in a way that was not done in the other Treks.
And once again, your holodeck characters are in a bottle, right? You should be able to get to know them. Why do we see Picard, you know, dabble around once or twice with each of the types of things he might dabble in? Why don't we get to know some of his holodeck friends?
Right, yeah.
They tried to do it with Janeway, but they did it in the stupidest way possible with the whole, you know, 1800s romance, romance, a Harlequin romance kind of thing, that she was the English Harlequin.
Yeah.
But the writers like, oh, the fans, they just don't appreciate a good story when they see one. They don't have the same appreciation I do for this sort of imaginative 1800s Victorian thing. It's like, yeah, the fans tune in to see a spaceship flying around and dealing with aliens. I get it. Vic Fontaine's also retro. But Vic Fontaine knows that.
Right.
Janeway's just in there playing a play. None of the characters there know they're on Voyager and doing and contributing to Voyager, and they don't know Janeway is Janeway.
Right.
What's the point? Vic Fontaine knows where he is, knows he's on a space station in the Federation. He knows all about their war stories because they tell them to him.
Yeah.
And he learns and helps them out. And that is how you use a bottle character in the holodeck.
Right, yeah. Or Hollow Swede in this case. Yeah. It's basically the same thing. I don't care what Court calls it. It's the same technology. It's the same thing.
Yeah. It's a suite because it's 3 times bigger, basically.
Yeah. And it used to be used for porn, essentially. Yeah.
That was amazing. It's still, I get the sense that it's still used that way throughout the entire movie. But yes, it was, when he was the Cardassian space station, the Cardassians used it almost exclusively for that, I believe. So.
Yeah. No, and you're right. I think that people were still using it for that purpose all the way through the series, but because we the lead characters weren't necessarily into that, we got to add in some other programs.
Yeah, Quark had to update his repertoire, which, you know,
yeah.
It's a good thing. And that's why Kira starts out hating the Holo Suite entirely, and then decides, I guess it's okay in some cases.
Yeah, I guess it's okay. I don't think she ever became really, really fond of it the way Dax was, for example.
She liked Vic Fontaine. That was the extent of her, you know, enjoying the Holo Suite.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think she was never going to be convinced of its value completely in the way that the Federation characters were.
No.
And again, that goes back to her backstory. You know, the way she grew up and the experiences that she's had in life aren't really conducive to a
wasteful, pleasure-seeking, frivolous activity.
Yeah. Speaking of, you know, other people watching the series as kind of proto-neophytes and giving me sort of new perspectives on things, the same individual who pointed out how unlikable all the characters in Emissary were has also commented to me that Kira as a character, he describes her as a little off. And, you know, and I reflected on that, and I was like, well, yeah, but there's a reason for that.
She's a basically good person, but yeah, she's a little bit hot-headed and stays that way for most of the series. Yeah. Because she's been through hell, and she's had to rely on only herself.
Right.
So.
Well, and, you know, what do you think about child soldiers in the real world? Yeah. And how screwed up they become. It makes sense, you know, because essentially that's what she was a child soldier.
Yeah.
And so she had no opportunity to have any sort of real childhood where, you know, things such as creativity and imagination and pretend play could be a part of her existence. And yeah, and the whole...
She was the worst finger painter at the 4-year-old level.
Yeah.
And her flock of flightless birds will someday be valuable.
Yeah. Yes.
And no, she did not think woodcrafts are the way to go.
No, she did not. Yeah, and well, the whole monastery life in general was not for her.
Yeah, I'm going crazy here. I need to be useful again.
Yeah. Yeah, just being quiet and contemplating nothingness. No, I can't do that.
I'll tear apart your entire arboretum while I try to.
Yeah. Yeah, so she, you know, yeah, she is a little off, and sometimes the decisions she makes are not necessarily fully thought through, although sometimes they can turn out awesome anyway.
I need a runabout. Oh, for what? I can't tell you that. Oh, by all means.
Yeah, sure. Take one of my runabouts. Yeah.
Well, anything? Can I offer you anything else?
Yes. What else can I give you for free without any explanation whatsoever? Yeah. Well, you know, even things like how she dealt with the Romulan situation.
You're gonna end up floating home. You're gonna end up on the other side of that bulkhead floating home. Yes.
Yeah. No, or later on, when she starts to have suspicions about the Romulans being in Bajoran space, and so she decides to challenge them with her
free impulse, you know, light orbital ships that have no shields and minimal weapons.
And what's hysterical is that was such a crazy move that the Romulan on the other side of this was like, okay, she can't possibly be that crazy. There must be something I'm not seeing here. I'm running away.
Remind me not to play roulette and wild draw with you.
Yeah. And you know, that all comes from the fact that, you know, in her background and in her history, there were probably many times where doing the crazy, desperate, seemingly ridiculous thing was the thing that got her out of whatever situation she was in. So that's kind of how her decision.
Two Cardassian patrols. I'm in the hill. They know I'm up here.
Yeah.
I can either hide and hope that they never find me, but that's really unlikely. Or I can go charging out to the first unit I see and try to kill as many of them as possible.
Yeah.
I'm sure that many times she charged the head Cardassian at that unit.
Yeah.
Him and blew through the rest, dodging phaser fire.
Yeah.
Or disruptor fire, to be more accurate.
Yeah. Yes, precisely. So yeah, so she's kind of been trained to maybe the crazy decision is the right one.
What choice do I have? The safe decision is certain failure, you know.
Yeah. And it was funny seeing the interplay between that sort of decision making and Cisco and the Federation's more deliberative decision making.
Yeah.
And the many times where you'd have an instance where Kira will go off half-cocked for some reason, and then Cisco will be like, wait, what? Yeah.
Why'd you do that?
Yeah.
Or better yet, he'll be like, I have to come down hard on you officially, but privately, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the responsibility off my shoulders, because I couldn't have done that.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well done. Now don't do that again, because man, that scared me. I thought you did fairly well once I smoothed your rough edges.
I
just recently watched The Siege
Which,
trilogy, the Circle Siege trilogy. I just recently watched that again.
yeah. No, and the fact that you brought that scene up kind of reveals another thing that DS9 often got very right, and that was the characters.
Say again?
The humor.
Oh, yeah. The humor.
Yeah.
Yes, the laughter.
Humor, yeah.
So many Treks attempted to do humor, and it came out really corny.
Yeah.
The Outrageous Okana is my example.
Yeah.
A really bad TNG episode that my wife, for some reason, loves, and I cannot understand why. That centers on a supposedly funny guy who's not remotely funny, and also an android trying to be funny from comics who are also not funny and failing to be funny even remotely until he's not trying, and then kind of funny maybe.
Yeah.
Like their humor is like, this is painful.
Yeah.
Whereas I think I think part of the reason for that is that it's hard to have much pain on TNG, and all humor derives from pain and loss.
True.
So that's our evolutionary response to struggling through life. That we laugh because that's the only way we don't cry sometimes.
Yeah.
And DS9 has a bunch of characters with a lot of flaws and struggles and whatnot. So it had opportunities for gallows humor and humor of the absurd, like One Little Ship.
One Little Ship. Yeah. That episode is so amazing because in many of the other Trek series, if you had a technical MacGuffin, you played it straight.
Yep.
Right? But in this one, like, the writers knew, okay, this is completely ridiculous. So they hung a lampshade on it in the episode.
The whole time you're laughing about how ridiculous it is.
Yeah. And it made the episode, instead of being, oh, this is really dumb, it made it fun.
Yeah.
And
just because we are shrinking two people to the size of coffee cups.
Yeah. And in the cards is another one where the writers are just like, screw it.
This is a really stupid idea, but there's a cool line in there if we write it, so let's just make it funny.
Yeah.
The soulless minions of orthodoxy.
And the and the lions and tigers and bears. Oh my!
Yes. Which
one reviewer suspects that is the whole reason the episode was written.
Come here, Ira Bear. Come here. Come here. Whack.
Yeah. It worked because the writers knew that it was stupid, that it was ridiculous, and so they didn't try to play it straight. They made it obviously ridiculous to such an extent, and I think it also worked because of strength of character, because
it has a nice cast to work with, and they all have such distinct characters that it's really easy to see how a story like that could actually produce the result it does.
Right, and well, when you're speaking of In the Cards in particular, the reason why that episode is so enjoyable is that its undercurrent is Jake wants to do something for his dad.
Yep.
And that is such a positive and kind of life-affirming motivation for something that it just makes the entire episode all that much more pleasant to watch.
And it tells a wholesome moral along the way that it isn't necessarily the card.
Right.
Not Cisco loves the card, but that's not the reason.
Yeah.
The reason he's so happy with what his son did is because the incredible journey he had to go through to do it.
Right.
The ridiculous amount of hard work he and Nog had to pull together to getting tangled up with the Dominion and Kai winning and whatnot.
Yeah. Right.
It's not the gift, it's the intent, sometimes.
Yeah. And I think a lot of humor today, and a lot of comedians and a lot of humorists kind of lose sight of the fact that humor is based on pain and loss, but I think for it to really be funny and to really be something that people will enjoy, you have to have some sort of positive undercurrent to it. It has to also be motivated by love, I would say.
Or at the very least, inclusion. So even if you're saying, oh boy, we're so stupid. It's we're so stupid, not you're so stupid.
Right.
A lot of political comedy today is failing, specifically because the people doing it are saying, haha, you are pathetic, while I sit and stare at you and laugh at your stupidity. As opposed to saying, man, we're all so dumb about this stuff.
Yeah.
You can appreciate that, because we are, we take things so seriously and we all have assumptions that sometimes turn out to be false and whatnot. I can appreciate a comic who comes from a left-wing perspective and yet recognizes the foibles in his side too.
Right.
But when I sit and watch Amy Schumer try to be funny, first of all, it's gross and there's absolutely nothing life-affirming about it. And second of all, it's all, I'm gross and you guys are gross, but not we're gross.
Yeah.
It's not we all have problems. It's I'm pathetic, and by the way, you're all assholes.
Yeah.
That's not funny. In fact, it's really rather painful and cringeworthy.
Yeah. And, I think if we think about the times when an episode of DS9 failed fundamentally, and I'm thinking of a lot of the Ferengi episodes in particular. Yeah. The reason why they failed is that it stopped being about, oh, we love these people and we love their foibles, and it became, let's laugh at these people.
Yeah.
And just chuckle about how superior we are because we don't think the same way they do.
Yeah, and also it was a bad caricature. It was character assassination of the worst order. We're laughing at Quark for things that have nothing to do with who Quark is.
Right.
That's the worst kind of humor.
Yeah.
I will turn you into something you're not and then mock you for it.
Right.
That's why a lot of political humor fails too, because they caricaturize the opposite side and say, this is who you are. And the other side says, A, you're wrong, and B, that's just really rude.
Yeah.
It's not funny, it's just mean.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately, the main reason why neither of us care for a lot of the Ferengi episodes is that in many cases it became, as you said, we're going to turn Quark into something he's really not, and then we're going to laugh at him because
we felt the need to laugh at his character trait, and we're putting it on Quark today.
Yeah.
Even when Quark is not being laughed at, as in Little Green Men, they're still managing to point at and laugh at people who don't deserve it. Like the 1947 Roswell, and the whole episode is basically, wow, we humans in 1947 were incredibly savage, stupid morons. And they exaggerate it to such a level that it just becomes not believable.
Yeah. Actually...
Yes, because we were trying to survive, but that's a whole nother...
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that always bothered me in some of the not as good Trek episodes, is when chronological snobbery was included. In reality, the past is a different country. And if you are not from the past, you cannot fully understand. You can try to understand to the best of your ability, but you cannot fully understand why people in the past made the choices they did.
The best you can do is read up on it and listen to what they said.
Right. Don't assume, it's bad to assume that, oh, you are superior in every sense from somebody who lived 200 years ago. I mean, if you really look at the world today, that turns out not to be the case. In many aspects, that is not the case.
Even where they fall short in knowledge, a lot of times they make up for it in ways that we would find amazing today. Like, they didn't know how to do a lot of the electronical wonders that we do today, but yet they still got all the same major tasks accomplished.
Yeah.
And sometimes it took an amazing Herculean effort to do that.
Yeah.
You know, look back at ancient Egypt. That's 3,000-4,000 years ago. And they're able to build these, you know, engineering marvels that we humans today struggle to do correctly with computers.
Right.
You know, it's like, you know, I get it. You know, it's very rudimentary compared to the stuff we're doing today with our advanced knowledge and whatnot. But that's not because they were inferior. That's just because they hadn't learned it yet. And
Right.
yeah, Trek has this tendency to be like, oh, ancient, you know, primordial humans of the 20th century with their silly ideas. Especially early TNG and then Voyager in particular.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, because we've talked before, that always bothered the crap out of me.
Yeah.
But except for aside from Little Green Men, I don't think DS9 ever really fell into that trap.
I can't think of another instance.
Yeah.
Even when they went back in
Past tense.
Yeah, past tense.
Yeah.
That was not. They showed the problems, but they did so in a way where Bashir's like, "This is barbaric," blah blah. He's gonna give the standard Federation speech, and Cisco's like, "Dude, they do. It's not that they don't care. They have no idea what to do.
Yeah.
They're lost. They're confused. They don't have a solution. Everything seems too horrible. Like, how do you solve these huge problems with the technology we have? And even though they could have, in a lot of cases, solve the problem, they didn't understand how.
Right.
That's not because they're bad people. And I love how in the end, the evil cops help them escape.
Right.
You know, they're not evil cops. They're just lost and sad. And you know, it's like they're in this ugly world. And yeah, if you're in an ugly world, sometimes you become ugly people.
Right.
So.
And then, you know, and that's something that's important to remember about people who lived in the past is
they're a lot harder.
I mean, their moral compasses and the way they saw the world was a lot rougher and a lot harsher. And the reason is because in the absence of modern technology, the world is pretty damn rough.
Yeah.
If you give birth to like, you know, 8 kids and 5 of them die in infancy, that's going to change how you view the world and how you interact with the world in ways that we as moderns who basically have very little in the way of infant mortality, although we still have some, but little in comparison to what was going on in the past. And we can't understand that. We can't possibly understand that because we've never experienced it, you know?
And that is contributing, by the way, to why they treated women the way they did in a lot of cases. We need you to be having lots of kids. First of all, because about half of them are going to die before they're 10.
Yeah.
And second of all, because we can't afford to like buy machines that don't exist or hire lots of people to do our work for us.
Yeah.
We have to do all the work.
Right.
We're on a farm and we need 10 people.
Yeah.
We have 4. We need 6 more. Get cracking on making some more kids so that we can go out and do, you know, handle a bigger field.
Right. Right.
You know, that may not be ideal, but you know, they didn't have another alternative at the time. They were doing the best they could.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's why, you know, past tense, that 2-parter works, where if it was handled by different writers or on a different series, it might not have worked in quite the same way, because at least they had that awareness that, oh, you know, if it's not a post-scarcity society, you know, then they are going to have problems that they're not going to know how to deal with, you know?
I have a little edge on me about Far Beyond the Stars. That's the only other DS9 episode I can think of that I didn't particularly like the way they handled the past.
Yeah.
I think they were oversimplifying the condition of blacks in New York City or San Francisco to a certain extent. I think they're highlighting real problems, and I think it's good to do that.
Yeah.
But I think that they made the struggle too black and white.
Yes.
They made the villain of the piece like too uncompromising.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really believe that it would be completely impossible to write a story with a black hero in 1956.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, I don't believe that.
Especially since four years later, Robert Heinlein wrote Starship Troopers with a Filipino protagonist.
Right. And I would say also, historical context is, yeah, there were other minorities in science fiction in particular. Science fiction was a progressive business.
Yeah.
People don't really realize that, but yeah, the 1930s science fiction was talking about the dangers of rapid industrialization and World War, and 1950s science fiction was very culturally and race aware.
Yeah.
And feminist.
Yeah.
There were a lot of empowered female characters in 1950s pulp science fiction.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's writing for a science fiction pulp magazine, and he wrote a black hero. And okay, maybe they rejected the first time, and then he comes up with the solution. It's a dream. We're looking into the future. I refuse to believe that any profit-motivated business wouldn't see that as still something not publishable. Like, I don't believe that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I maybe I'm just being racially stupid, but from where I sit, I don't look back at the 1950s and 1960s America as that stubborn.
Yeah.
These are the people that eventually led the race riots and civil rights and.
Right. Well, actually, in the 1950s, the civil rights movement was already going on.
That's what I'm saying. I mean,
yeah, people, and there were many white people in society that agreed with the aims of the civil rights movement too.
Yeah. The white folks, I hate to say it to the black civil rights protesters who did a lot of heroic work, but the white folks made it possible for you to succeed.
Right.
I think it's hard to look past that because they didn't have enough numbers to get legislation passed.
Right.
They needed 40% of whites to back their ideas.
Right.
And they got more than 40%, especially in the North.
Right.
So, I mean, if they set the piece in Selma and it was a southern U.S. pulp newspaper,
yeah,
maybe they'd have a bigger case. But they didn't do that. They said it in California. So.
Right.
Rant over.
Rant over. Right. So, anything else that you would like to close with before we end the stream in regards to Deep Space Nine?
I want to say two things. First, if you haven't given DS9 a chance because there are certain facets of it that do not strike you as comfortable relative to the other Trek series of which you're used to, I urge you to stretch your mind a little and give it a chance and look past some of the early foibles because every Trek starts slow.
Mm-hmm.
And DS9 perhaps started faster than most of the rest. And give it a chance in the sense that don't think of it as it has to be exactly like every other Star Trek. What makes DS9 attractive to me is partially that it is different. It's something new.
Yeah.
Look at where we are now in the Star Trek franchise. We are stagnant. They haven't changed anything in a long time, and boy, there's not a lot of new content, is there? Yeah. Even the rumored new show is struggling to get enough approval to go because everyone's bored. And no one's going to pay $9 a month to watch the new show hoping it's different.
Right.
So, yeah, they've stagnated themselves into death, and DS9 was the thing that kept them alive for a while, in my opinion. But, what do I know?
Yeah.
And second, I would urge you to, if you're a writer, watch DS9 even if it's not your cup of tea, because there are many cases where DS9 is a writing clinic, and it is part of the reason why I learned to love writing.
Right.
Watching Duet, it's like poetry.
Yeah.
It's just listen to the lines and be like, wow, there is not one wasted line, no bad scenes, everything makes sense.
Right.
No, and everything has a point, and it's clean and beautiful and character focused, and yeah.
Right.
Peter Allen Fields. Watch any Peter Allen Fields episode, pretty much. Actually, give him credit. Watch most Renee Echeverria episodes too, because he's a character master. If you want to learn characters,
Yes.
go deal with him.
Didn't he write The Quickening and Children of Time, which we were talking about earlier?
Yes.
Yes. See?
He wrote many good episodes.
Yeah. So
some of the most underrated, like The Begotten, was in Renee Echeverria. That's a first season episode. Or no, sorry, Forsaken rather.
Yeah.
Renee Echeverria. That was a good one. You know.
Yeah. That uses that episode uses a character from a previous series in a way that she had not been used to before, and it actually makes her likable instead of kind of annoying.
Yeah, well, Oksana was never particularly pleasant to me, but what they did, they took a character trait that she had that had been established and said, this is why it's good that she has this character trait.
Yeah.
Because when she uses it on TNG, it's for bad comedy. And, bad comedy, it's bad comedy because it's TNG writers and they don't know how to write comedy.
Yeah.
But they use it as like sort of, ha, isn't this funny that she's just this open-minded, whatever. And then on DS9, it's like, no, really, this can save somebody.
Yeah.
Somebody this accepting and open and loving of other people.
Yeah.
Can really be a difference maker for someone who's on the edge and struggling. And you see it play out, and you see Odo realize, okay, she's really over the top and annoying, but hey, I like her anyway.
Yeah.
Because there's a thing of value about her that I haven't experienced in too many of the other solids, as he would say. So. Yeah, there's all kinds of episodes like that where they rehabilitate a bad idea and make it a good idea from prior treks. So give it a chance. Yeah, watch it from the perspective of being a writer and learn to love the wordsmith that they use, because a lot of the dialogue is incredibly well written. Yeah, and funny, like in that scene at the beginning of The Circle. Yeah, the high paced. Oh, come on in, join the crowd. Yeah. Did you plan this? Oh my God, no one is leaving me alone. Yeah. All I'm doing is trying to pack, and I can't even get a word in edgewise. Yeah. Good stuff. Any other thoughts by you before we sign off? Yes. So I would like to amplify what Matt just said and say that if you haven't watched DS9 before, for whatever reason, you do definitely need to give it a try. It is a show that teaches you a lot about writing and how to write a good story and try to get into the heads of characters that maybe don't have the perspective that you have. Additionally, I would like everyone to watch DS9 because, as I said in the stream with John last week, DS9 is one of the reasons I got into science fiction as a genre. There were several other reasons too, but DS9 hit at just the right time for me, and I became a lover of science fiction in general because of how shows like DS9 and Babylon 5 told great stories. So definitely give it a try if you haven't already. Told great stories in the sense that they had big ambition and high stakes. How many TNG episodes had the sort of scope that the Dominion War arc has? Really? Right. Yeah. Those stories need to be told too, even if you love the anthology style, every episode stands alone style because it's comforting and you don't have to know what happened before to watch it. Fine, great. But the big stories need to be told too. You have to give them a little more time and think about them, but they're great stories and well worth the attention. Because the bigger the ambition, the bigger the payoff. Yeah, and if you really want to know how television got to the point it is now, where a lot of series now are doing the continuing storytelling, where basically the television series is a novel in visual form, you need to watch things like DS9 and Babylon 5 because those are the series that sort of inaugurated that way of approaching the television medium, and they kind of confirm for me why I tend to prefer the television medium to, say, a movie, because you do have more time to tell these sweeping epic stories with high stakes and develop characters in ways that you really can't in a movie. In a movie, most of the time,
characters are pretty static. So you don't have a lot of time to develop them.
You got a character development from the main character only in a movie, generally.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes the supporting lead as well, but
Yeah,
the developments are very limited to 1, 2, or 3 characters at most. The ensemble is less important. Even in a movie like The Avengers, the ensemble is really there to make this stage bigger, and they all have their little moments and whatnot, but it isn't really about the ensemble as much as it is about the core plot of the action. In a TV show, you'll learn to love every one of those characters if they're good, well written.
Right. Yeah, and certainly DS9 and Babylon 5 and some of the other series that came out during that time period are exemplars of that strength that television has.
Indeed.
Okay, well, that seems like a good a place to end this particular broadcast. So I'd like to thank Matthew for coming in tonight and being willing to talk and geek out about one of our favorite shows from the 90s.
Always willing to geek out. That's never...
Always willing to geek out. And I would like to ask people to buy the Freedom's Light anthology. The proceeds to that go to the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education, which is a fabulous and fantastic cause to give money to. And also to take a stop at my website. Next week, I'm going to be doing some more geeky things. I've decided that I've been spending too much time on politics, and I really need to get away from that and start doing more geeky things for the next couple of weeks. So stop by there at therightgeek.blogspot.com, and I'll be reviewing some books that I've read recently, and maybe hopefully at some point next week I'll be able to see the Wonder Woman movie, which I hear has been getting rave reviews, and I'll be able to talk about that as well. Thank you for tuning in, everyone, and thank you, Matthew, for being my guest for tonight. And I hope you have a good evening.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Good night. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Yeah, you too. Bye.